Biggest pieces that I saw when looking at this plan were one, the workouts being too close together, two, them being pretty repetitive, and three, Matt, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited for this. This is going to be a fun one because it's a 10K build, and I know lots of people have asked for 10K stuff. I've focused on the marathon, but I know you like the 10K. We were talking a little bit offline, and so want to have some fun with this one. So first, if you can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your running history, and then I might have a few more questions for you.
Yeah, so Matt Miller. So running history wise, like you had mentioned, we talked offline about really liking the 10K stuff, but background, I have a few years of running kind of on and off, life changes, things like that. So sometimes not super consistent, but have dabbled in half marathons, 10Ks, 5Ks, with most recent race being a 10K and really fell in love with that distance. So kind of wanted to focus a little bit more on that with this build coming up for a race coming up in the fall here local to me. So looking forward to that. And thank you again for the opportunity. Looking to talk through all of this with you.
Yeah, no problem. These are really fun for me. I enjoy them quite a bit. So it's hopefully you'll get a lot of it and have some fun too. And I actually like the 10K distance. I think, everybody's enamored with the marathon right now. But if you go back to like the 90s and 2000s, there used to be like 10K road races like every weekend. Like it was the jam. Like people were doing it. And so it's a lost art, I would say, of 10K training and 10K racing. So this will be really fun to kind of break it up and actually enjoy it. And so the race you're going towards, we're about 17 weeks out, give or take, on the day of recording here, 17 weeks out from race day. Can you give us your previous PR and some history of like the training plans or consultations and such you've done before, so we can get a bit of a background of what you've done training wise?
Yeah, of course. So for 10K PR, I actually go based off like the mile pace, not the actual distance
Okay,
pace.
got it.
The 10K that I have was a little bit short, but it was 6:44 a mile.
Okay.
Um, and did that in December of 2024. So a little bit of time ago. And since then been kind of on and off running. When it comes to my training, I've tried a couple of different methods, but one of them was just an online plan that I found that's free. Was kind of critical velocity, threshold paces, one workout, one quality session a week. So nothing too strenuous, but built up to a fairly decent long run for me anyways, being about 15 miles. And really enjoyed that build. And that's what I actually use it for a half marathon race, but that race got canceled just due to weather local to me. And then kind of tapered an additional couple weeks, transitioned into a 10K race and really fell in love with the distance. And then after that, I actually attempted to use a Run app. I know it's super popular and was just like going into it kind of blind, didn't really have a ton of background, told it kind of what I would want to do for a goal pace race and kind of what I wanted to do for different workouts, but didn't really have a bunch of customization to it and kind of fell flat. I looked back at my history and it was just really intense, doing 2 quality sessions some weeks, 3 quality sessions with some quality in the long run, which definitely really took a toll on the body. Had some like tendinitis flare-ups in the ankle and was like, yeah, definitely need to tone down the quality sessions and kind of transition to something a little bit more, easy pace focused, so to speak. So it's kind of what I'm doing now with like the plans that I've been looking at and trying to build out on my own with AI mostly now, moving forward.
Perfect. And so the plan you submitted, AI model, what were kind of the prompts and ideas that you put in there to come up with the training plan that we'll show here and go through in a minute or so?
Yeah, so try to do quite a bit of reading after that injury to kind of like give myself some knowledge on maybe how I should build out a plan for myself, see what works for me, and kind of go off that previous plan that really did seem to work for me. Um, so looked at like Jack Daniels, look at Hudson for some different like tips and tricks of like how to build out a plan. So when I used Claude specifically, and when I went into that, I went in with the mindset of like, hey, let me kind of give it like the weekly volume I'm doing now, kind of where I would like to ideally peak at, and then also let it kind of give the parameters that like Jack Daniels would give for how much you want to do your interval pace or your tempo pace. And so kind of put all of that into it and said, hey, build this out. This is the goal. race. This is the date of the race. So this is how long the plan needs to be. And it kind of spit out this plan. And openly, I looked at it, and even like looking at it now, I can kind of tell like there are some weeks that I'll definitely have to spot. Like I was open to like spot checking from week to week the volume and some of the paces that it was having me do, or how much of a certain pace it was having me do. So knew it wasn't going to be perfect, but I was like, I just need something to kind of like start as a foundation to be able to build up to this race coming up for me.
Okay, cool. I've got a bunch of thoughts about it, and I think probably the best way to do that is actually just open up the training plan and go through it if you're cool with that.
Yeah, of course.
So let's jump in. This is where we're starting. So I'm assuming this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I've actually just closed that cell just for a little bit more room. And so this is a realistic picture of where your running's at here. Obviously, this is easy and long run as you've delineated, but this is accurate, right? And we're going by time, I believe.
Yep. So yeah, I know I didn't put it in there, but yeah, so 25 minutes easy, conversational pace.
Perfect. And I'll assume based on what you've said, looking at the Daniels charts and such, you've got your e-pace, your tempo pace, your interval pace, all that fun stuff set up for you. Okay,
yep.
Perfect. Okay. So we've got some good base assumptions there to look through it. So the first thing I would say is like the progression per se, like in terms of, you're not jumping up like crazy, is quite good. I think 4 weeks, 5 weeks, because you're not coming off an injury currently, correct? Like you're healthy.
Yeah, so healthy, kind of just sporadic running, and then some cross training as well thrown in there.
Okay, fair enough. And what's your like amount of time per day that you can train?
So it kind of varies. So busy dad of 3,
Sure.
Work full time. So try to wake up early. I'm kind of an early riser. So if I can get out of the house at 5:30, sometimes I can have upwards of an hour to train, but that'll include, this plus some stretching, some rolling out, some simple things, just try to like keep my recovery, well focused on as well throughout this build.
Okay. So the first thing I would look at is there's a couple kind of rule of thumbs to think about here. And so this is why I asked about how much time you have to train, because it will apply it a little bit differently. So to be clear, there's rules in terms of what we would love to follow if everything was like perfectly great and you had all the availability in the world. And then there's the actual real life application of like you as a busy dad, worker and such, and trying to go forward. So I'm going to put forth the ideas. I'm going to respect, obviously, to the best of my ability, without knowing your life and day to day and being in conversation with you. But one of the things we want to look at, if I just scroll ahead to like week 6 here when we start workouts, is generally we do not want your workout day to be longer than your easy runs. And so the reason for that becomes if you get an injury, let's say, okay, like Achilles flare up, peroneal flare up, like you mentioned that you've had before, we don't know if it was actually the duration, because that's a higher day, or the intensity, or a mix, right? Mm-hmm. And when we don't know those things, when we try to reintegrate post-injury, we don't know which variable to omit or which ones we can bring back in safely, okay? So again, you're a busy dad of, I think you said 3, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, and work and everything. So I'm going to paint the best picture of the knowledge in terms of how we apply it. At the end of the day, you're obviously the one who has to get out there and ensure that your kids still get to see you and you get to go to work on time and all those things, right? So I fully respect all of that. I just want to make that note here as we think about this, because that's something that, like, let's say you came to me halfway through and there was like an injury audit type thing we're looking at. It would be like, would be really hard to decipher that. And then it becomes really hard to figure out what to put back in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. So, for the first, 4, 5, 6 weeks, I've got no problem with you building up the volume. If you wanted to, we could elongate them out. Ideally, I like to see people 40, 45 minutes. And the reason for that is once you start workouts, you're going to want a 10 to 15 minute warm up, a 10 to 15 minute cool down. Well, that's 30 minutes already, right? Mm-hmm. So then you're only really playing with 10 to 15 minutes of work. So it's not like it's an absolute rule that must be followed all the time, but I'm only thinking about this for you, given that you've had some of that injury history with the things that have happened in the past. Yeah. So no problems here in the first kind of 4, 5, 6 weeks or 5 weeks that you've got a volume. If anything, you could increase like 1 run a week by 5 minutes until you get to 45 minutes, or 2 runs like a Monday, Friday or something like that, just to elongate those up a little bit. But again, I want to fully respect the parameters that you actually have as the person who has to do it. Like, I'm the one who gets to tell you what looks good on a spreadsheet and what rules to follow in terms of it, but you're the one who actually has to go out and do this. So take that with what it is. I don't want, any marital or familiar problems or work problems for you as part of this. Okay. So let's go to the workouts here. So for the rest of the volume throughout the weeks, I'm just going to leave that roughly as is, because we've kind of talked about where that needs to be. And I think where we could have the most impact here, we already know the volume could be up on the easy runnings, as we've talked about that. The biggest pieces that I saw when looking at this plan were two things. One, the workouts being too close together, and two, them being pretty repetitive. And three, the work to rest ratios being really skewed. And so I see where they're coming from. Like when you look at some of the CV workouts that like Tin Man first brought through that other coaches are now using, or some of the original Daniels stuff on the interval side, he has bigger interval recoveries. I actually like, especially for more amateur athletes who don't have a lot of volume, to keep that recovery short, because it forces you to actually pace and it gives you actually more time at max VO2. So if you think about an interval session, let's say you've got 5 by 3 minutes at interval pace, right? If you watch how Daniels describes this, he says you really only get to max VO2 for maybe say the last minute of the first one, okay? And then if you take 3 minutes recovery, you're not fully back to rest, but let's just say colloquially, you're back to rest, right? So then it takes you another 2 minutes to get up, right? So of those 3 minutes times 5 on full recovery, you only get like 5 minutes at or around max VO2. Whereas if we shorten that recovery, your heart rate doesn't come down as much. So you get more each rep. You actually get more time in each rep at max VO2. So your cumulative time at max VO2 is bigger on shorter recovery. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then secondarily, from a demands of racing perspective, it's like, well, you don't get 3 minutes of recovery in a 5K, right? Like you don't get to do that. And so it gives you a little bit more of the demands of the race. Now, one could make the argument against what I just said and be like, well, then why don't we time trial the whole time? It's like, well, yeah, that's also not productive to what you're going to do. And then the third piece I would say on those intervals is, they're quite repetitive, as I said, and I see what you did or Claude did, right? It's like kind of the Norwegian 4x4, 5x4, 3 minutes recovery. But what I find happens, and we'll say this about the tempo stuff here in a minute, is when you have really repeatable workouts, athletes will want to chase to prove improvement, right? So it's like week 5, week 6, it's like, oh, I want to really see if this is working and it's improving, right? So I'm going to use those 3 minute repeats, be like, well, I know I did them at 6:45 miles a couple of weeks ago, so maybe I can squeeze them to 6:40, right? Well, then what happens is you're not actually doing the workout for the purpose of the workout, you're just racing, right? And so you're trying to prove something. So I said this a while back on an episode where it's like, or I said it on the marathon podcast, actually, it's like you're pulling the carrots up to see if they're ready, and the problem is like you can't replant them after, right? So what happens when we start chasing is we lose sight of the purpose of the workout. And that's where I find most people get injured, burnt out, feel like they're not improving. So then they throw the whole plan out halfway through and then they're trying to reset and do everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
And then on the intensity distribution piece, you've got it as like a Tuesday, Thursday right now, especially given that volume and the rest day before. I'd want to move that out. A couple of reasons. One, that's 2 runs pretty close together that are hard, especially on a lower volume plan. One thing to think about higher volume, moderate volume, whatever you want to say, is that doing more volume actually helps you recover better. It's paradoxical. I fully respect and understand that, but doing more volume actually helps you recover better. So when you're lesser volume, you don't recover as well. So having those 2 days relatively close is going to be a bit problematic for you. You might get away with it for like 4 or 5 weeks, but you're probably going to plateau or get really flat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
The additional piece of that is I actually don't like doing workouts after an off day. A couple of reasons for that. One, if you're fresh, then it's almost like you're tapered every week for that workout. So then the taper doesn't really do its kind of magic, right? 2, if you are fresh, you crank the workouts. And so if you're cranking them, what ends up happening, I see a lot of people who have rest days the day before workouts, is they have an inflated pace, especially when it's coupled with these long recoveries. It's like, well, I can do, interval pace at 6:20s. It's like, well, okay, well, you're basically tapered every time you do it. And you've got these massive recoveries. So then what happens is they take that pace and then they reverse engineer out on the JD tables. And they go, oh, well, if my interval pace is this, therefore my 10K race pace is this. And then they go out and after like a 1.5 miles, they're like, oh my God, what hit me? I'm completely screwed, right? And so it's just like little errors like that in these type of cycles that if we can eradicate them early, gives you a better indication when you get closer to race day of what your actual pacing should be, say for any environmental terrain type changes that you need to make. Any questions or thoughts on that? I just threw a lot at you, obviously, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess one thought more personal to me, and I don't know, like, depending on athletes, like cross training wise, like, would that be the same approach if like somebody were to cross train on that rest day on that Wednesday instead of doing a true rest day, like maybe an hour on the bike or something like that? Like that, does that change that dynamic in any way? Because I thought about like tampering or trying to throw that into a plan as well, but I was like, I mean, I just didn't want to mess the plan up too much compared to like
Yeah.
what I was already trying to build out.
Yeah, so totally for cross training. So that would help eradicate part of the problems. Like on the list of problems, it would help eradicate the freshness, but it still wouldn't eradicate how close it is. Like I really think athletes that aren't like middle distance specialists or really elite people are going to not maximize that second workout that close.
Okay.
So I think what ends up happening is, you know, as you said kind of earlier, you've got a limited amount of time per day that you're trying to maximize, right? For your
Mhm.
performance. Now, different story. If you were, you know, single guy in your 20s who can recover all day, you know what I mean? Like different problems, right?
Yeah.
But because we're trying to maximize each day, I actually think you're wasting, like, even let's say you don't get injured, you're able to do it, everything's good. I actually think you don't get as much quality out of that second session having too much carrying fatigue from the tempo session 2 days
Mhm.
before.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then actually another question I had too, just because like again was trying to like kind of just following Claude's like input here. Tempos and intervals, I don't have a track background. Does it matter like which day of the week they are per se? Like in the sense of like, should you do intervals first in the week versus tempos or tempos first in the week and intervals? That's something that I wasn't sure about either when building out this plan.
Yeah, so it's probably got it right. I really like the tempo 48 hours after the long run. So that Sunday, Tuesday is really, really helpful, I find. You've still got a little bit of junk and tired from the long run, but not enough to like kind of destroy you. But also, we want that tempo like a good aerobic stimulus and running on tired legs, right? So I love that part of the setup. So generally, what I would go, and again, I'm telling you best case scenario, full respect to your life and demands and such, right? But uh, I would say if we could move that interval session to the Friday, you're going to have a much better setup through your week.
Okay.
So if we're cool, we'll just assume I'm not going to copy and paste every cell over because that would take a ridiculous amount of time. And I am
Yeah.
not an Excel wizard to make columns switch. I don't know how to do that. So we're going to assume for the rest of this that we've moved this over to Fridays. Is that fair?
Yeah, works for me.
Okay. The next piece I would say is, you know, to do a fitness benchmark here, you could, but I think what would end up happening is like, well, you're essentially doing a 5K race. And if I was doing a 5K race, we're basically going to need to taper before to actually get an actual fitness benchmark. And then we have to reverse taper out. So you end up losing like 2 weeks. Now, it's a 17-week plan. You could, if you really want to. I would prefer to jump into workouts, but I'm going to leave this week up for assumption for you because I'm not actually coaching you and I don't know what you kind of need mentally to feel like you're good to go. My argument would be not to, but I'll leave this week kind of as is as a placeholder for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and I just to like add some context there. So like I put it in there mostly for me, like that first like 5 weeks that we have there to kind of see where I'm at and then like evaluate VDOT scores, whatever it may be on pacing and stuff so that I kind of know like, hey, this is where I'm at. Again, to your point of like, I don't want to inflate like my interval paces and think like, oh, I can do this because I feel good on that given day and then wreck myself 4 weeks later. So that's kind of like why I had it in there originally.
Yeah, fair
But yeah,
enough.
totally open to like switching that up as well.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that thought. Like that is a logical thought. I don't want to say like, how dare you or you're stupid. That's not my position. It's a completely logical thought to have that. The problem becomes is it's going to be really hard to do an all out 5K, let's say, to get those scores when you've had no intensity for 6 weeks,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
So you're actually not, you'll get something that's broadly indicative of what you're capable of, but it's not actually really close to what you're capable of because as soon as you stack on intensity for like 3 or 4 weeks, that number is going to change. Right.
Okay.
So I would just basically go off of a best estimate. Again, if for you mentally and you're an analytic person and you really are stuck on doing it, I'm not going to say no. I've had people do it it's not like it's, the devil. It's not like it should be avoided, but I just think you could get better use of going through and doing workouts. Additionally, going and cranking a hard 5K off of like no effort for 6 weeks is a little bit of an injury risk to me, because it's like you're probably going to blow apart at like a mile and a half, 2 miles, because you'll inevitably be like going hard and you haven't run on hard legs, you're not used to it. And then it's like, okay, what happens when you're maybe flailing for the last 800 meters, trying to chase a pace that you preemptively wanted to have before
Yeah.
that? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's kind of some of the like psychology and thinking behind it, if that makes sense. So again, I'll leave that. You can talk to me offline if you have questions when we get done. But
Yeah, of course.
this one, if we start into week 7 here, I would say 10-minute warm up. I like a little bit of a longer warm up, so I would say up to 15 for you on this level of volume.
Okay.
2 by 10 minutes. 5 minutes jog is like a lot. Like, I mean, you could like clear your whole feed on Instagram with that. So I actually like on 10 minutes, 2 minutes recovery.
Okay.
One of the reasons for that is 5 minutes, you get outside of your tempo zone, because you're like, oh, this is fine. I've got 5 minutes recovery, right? There's a psychology if you have lesser recovery to actually keeping the effort much more in line. And so 5 minutes recovery is like, I'll do 2 by 20 minutes on 4 minutes recovery for reference. Like I double up that workload on less recovery. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
So you'll get more bang for your buck. Same thing as when I talked about the interval sessions, like the amount of time, right? Like if you've got 5 minutes, you get less time in the next one pushing up against that LT. Same thing for warm up. I'm not going to edit on all of them because we'll make that assumption across all of them, but I would start with something a little bit less aggressive. So 60-60 would be where I'd go. So that would be minutes at interval pace. So we'll get rid of this. So 8 by 60-60. So 60 seconds at interval pace, 60 seconds E pace. So the E pace recovery here early on actually forces you to pace really well, because if you get long recovery on intervals or like easy jog recovery on intervals, it's really easy to crank it, especially if you've got a speed bias. Like if you do strength training, plyos, anything like that, you're a little bit stronger. And so it encourages early on bad pacing. Because so I've done this before myself, like when I was competing, I was an idiot. It's like, well, if my first rep was X, then every rep has to be that pace or faster, right? And so if you've got this massive recovery and you just started intervals, or even worse, your first week you do them and you crank it, and then the next week you go, well, it's got to be faster than next week, or at least as fast, right? We're not actually learning how to pace. We're just chasing a number, rather than if we put in that E pace, you'll figure out at like 4 or 5 of them if you're going too fast. And then it's a great adjustment early on when you've only done 60 seconds of interval pace, right? Rather than going out and doing 3 minutes. So again, we're going to assume those are all on Friday. So again, this is where I talked about off the top, like these plans repeating themselves and like kind of chasing it. So I think you would have seen, because I know you've commented on some of the videos, which I appreciate, by the way, breaking up like broken and straight. So I would do like 15 minutes straight tempo. And so one of the things that people sometimes aren't like, I'm not subscribing this idea to you, more as just a teaching point, is they go, but yeah, my volume's going to go down though, because last week I did 2 by 10 and this week I did 15. That's 5 minutes less of volume. So like, how am I going to be progressing? You have to remember, it's not about progressing per se week over week. It's also, this is a different stimulus. Like you can fake 2 by 10, but this is really figuring out pacing. This is going to dial in a lot more pacing. It's also a longer stimulus at threshold, right? So you, just because it's not the exact same or more doesn't mean that it's not a required stimulus. We also have to think about building up for the entirety of the build. Like we can't just like build ad infinity or just keep the workouts the exact same. So we want to make sure that we're setting up for success. And again, we're coming back to this idea of like, well, hopefully later on in the build, we might get you do 20, 25 minutes at tempo. Like that's a great workout for a 10K. But if we jump to that right away without testing it at 15, you're probably going to like bomb at 12 or 15 and then jog it in, right? So we're always trying to set the building blocks for later in the build early, because if I was coaching you and we saw that, and let's say the first mile was great, second mile was great, or the back end of the second mile was bad on that, I'd be like, hey, Matt, let's just check in on that pacing. We're going to dial it back a little bit, right? Because then we're getting feedback early in the build that's actually going to allow us to do better tempos throughout. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And then I guess one of the things too that I was kind of curious about on the tempo side of it, when you're going to like taper, and that's one of the things that I was like kind of concerned about with like building out a plan. Do you do like continuous taper the week of, or continuous tempo the week of the race week, or is it like prefer broken then? Like that's one of the things too that I wasn't sure how to like navigate when it came to like building this out.
So I'll show you. Like I've talked about this in a couple videos that'll be coming up, but for this one here, so this is race week. This is my go-to. I just love this workout. Like I'm just putting 10 because that's probably what you have in there. 4 times 4 minutes at tempo on 1 minute easy jog, 10-minute warm down. So the reason for this is you want something to keep the legs going. You want something when the anxiety and thoughts about racing are a little high to like burn off a little bit of energy, but you also want something that's not going to harm you because it's really long, right? And I find what happens a lot of time when we put in a speed session that week, especially on this type of lower volume, is you crank it trying to prove, and then you end up flat for race day. So that's the type of session I like late in a taper week.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to pop back up here. Where are we? Okay. So let's go. Yeah, we did the 15. So this one, I might do something 3 times 8 minutes. And I do that on 90 seconds for you probably. And that's easy jog recovery. So all your tempo work is going to be easy jog recovery. So when we look at this one, I would do something like maybe 7 to 8 times 90 seconds. Oops, 90. Everybody's going to see how much I suck at typing. 90 seconds at 5K on 45 seconds. Easy jog. So delineation there for you.
Okay.
Okay, back here. So we did 3 by 8. So for this one, I would look at elongating. So I'd make the assumption that essentially your pacing has gone well. We're feeling good. So this is where I would go 8 times 2 minutes at 5K on 1 minute easy jog. Again, that's a really great session. If you think about it, 16 minutes at or around max VO2 effort. Also really great pacing because the recovery is really short on that. And once you get up past 90 seconds, you start to feel it if you've messed up the pacing.
Mm-hmm. And then a question about that too, just like like verbiage and stuff, just for my understanding. So like I know we talk about like I pace. Is there like a broad difference like for an amateur runner like myself, like between 5K pace and I pace, or are they going to be like, 5 seconds a mile off of one another and they're not really much different? Like how is that like brought into this, I guess, versus one versus the other?
It's a good question. So the further you get away from, let's say, a 13-minute 5K, the more gap there is between those paces. So the traditional definition of max VO2 is anywhere from like 10 to 12 minutes, like your maximal output for 10 to 12 minutes. Okay. So if we look at Daniel's language, interval pace for him is essentially 3K to 5K. And so why he says that is because at the elite end, like guys are running 3Ks, I've coached somebody as fast as 7:42 in the 5K, right? Or in the 3K, sorry, rather, and 13:21 in the 5K, right? So like for most people at that level, interval pace is dead center between the two of those, right? Mm-hmm. But as you elongate out and the further you get away from 5K pace, interval pace, the gap between those elongates as well too. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep, makes sense.
So for you, right, like I'm going to guess, your goal is 41:30. You're probably like a 19:30-ish 5K runner, right? That's a big difference in what you would run for 10 minutes, 12 minutes all in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's going to be quite a big gap in pacing. For you, like I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but my guess is like in miles, it's probably going to be like 6 to 8, 6 to 9 seconds slower. So that does change how hard some of these workouts are if you think about it. Here, I'm going to put in a range on this one and go 17:30 to 20:00. I like ranges because if you're pacing well and things are feeling good, you can hit that upper end. If you haven't paced it well or it's not going well, you've got an off ramp a little earlier. Does that make sense?
Yep. And let's say like pacing is poor, because that's the one thing that I definitely need to work on. I was like a heart rate trained person. Like I went by heart rate all the time, like religiously. Let's say I didn't pace well and I was at that 17:30. Would I make my cool down longer? Would I think about next week or next time continuous and being like, oh, maybe I should be on the lower end and kind of like focus on that pacing for the next tempo session that I have, or what's the approach there from like a thought perspective?
Good question. So I wouldn't elongate the workout or the warm up, or warm down. What I would do is I would note and I would look at my pacing a little bit more closely. So for people who struggle with pacing or have come from like heart rate per se, but then haven't really correlated it over to, pace or figuring it out, I would go somewhere. It doesn't have to be a track. It can be. I don't like running on the track all that much, to be honest. But if you go somewhere like we've got a 880-meter old horse track loop here in Kingston, it's random, like literally they used to race horses there at the fair. And so I can't tell you where the 400 is or the 200 is or, the half mile is or anything like that. I just know that when I'm running tempo workouts at that bench on that corner, I'm usually between 56 and 58 seconds. Okay. I could tell you roughly what the distance is, but I don't know exactly. And so the reason why I like check-ins like that is you can check in early and often on your pacing, and then you actually get the ability to change it. So let's say you're on a loop that's 800 meter, half mile, right? But you check it at the bench and you're 36 seconds. Okay, that rep was too fast and I ended up dying this week in the tempo. Okay, next week, I'm going to make sure that I'm 38 on each lap or whatever the number, you know what I mean? That you get some of these intermediaries where you're not exactly relying on this outside data from a watch or heart rate to kind of guide it. But if you're dying at the end of tempos, it automatically tells me that you've started out too fast or you've picked it up too much in the actual workout.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So as a general rule of thumb, like, teaching point, I like to start my tempos, like if I'm out running tempos, 3, 5, 6, 7 seconds a mile slower on the first mile. Maybe first K, like I speak Canadian like the rest of the world does. You guys speak American, but
Yes.
So if you convert it either way, I like to start it a little bit slower and ease into it. You don't need to be pressing up against that line right away, because if you do, it's really easy to bleed over. And once you're over, it's really hard to come back, especially in straight tempos. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool. So here's where I would break it up and do something slightly different than the build that we've done thus far. So I would look at this and start throwing in some 10K pace. So I might do 5 times 4 minutes, to 4 to 5 times 4 minutes at 10K on 1 minute easy jog. Easy jog recovery. So the reason here is why I'm doing this for you. This isn't something I would do in every 10K build for people. I do it in a lot of 10K builds, but not all of them. Is we want you familiarizing with this pace early and often, so you've got some good feedback going into the race. And so if you look at this, we're roughly 6 weeks of build out before the taper week. And so here we want to start pushing that, because oftentimes I find for lower volume or newer athletes is they don't really have a good pacing. And I think sometimes as coaches, we know we can develop the physiology, but for some athletes, they want to have this data so they can go and pace. And I think it's really hard for us to infer off tempo pace and or interval pace or CV pace and be like, okay, well, this is it, right? I also think 10K pace is a really good stimulus. If you look at 10K pace done properly, it could be akin to what Daniels describes as cruise interval pace, where it's a little bit faster than tempo, but not quite 5K pace. So you're still within a great physiological zone. Or if you look at zone models, it's upper end zone 3. You look at Steven Sawyer's, it's hard, but not extreme kind of thing. So it's still a great workout, but I think for you, given kind of what you've described as yourself and the limitations you have, I think it's a really great workout for dialing in. Similar to what I say in the marathon, where we do the 90 to 100 minutes. I'd rather you figure out the pacing is like horrible and bad a couple of weeks out than a couple miles in on race day. So to give you a little bit more feedback early on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So here I might come back down in distance a little bit, but do like 5 to 6 times 5 minutes at tempo on easy jog. Just like, you're getting 30-ish minutes at tempo, 25 to 30 minutes, 1 minute easy jog. So nothing too crazy. Here, I would go back to interval pace, and same idea here is I don't want you chasing that 10K pace every week. So I would do something like 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1 minutes at 5K on 50% previous rep recovery. And then obviously same warm down. So this one's a really good pacing one, because 3 minutes, you're getting 90 seconds. right? So even if you see the difference between like what you had before, 3 minutes to 3 minutes versus 3 minutes with 90 seconds and more afterwards, right? The other thing this does from a pacing perspective, really easy to do the one, not as easy to do the two. Those 2 3s in the middle is the actual workout. The rest of it is just kind of around it, but you're going to learn how to pace and recover on your feet for that.
Gotcha.
Cool.
Yeah, works for me.
Sweet. I actually like this next one. So 2 by 12.5. I
I'm
would just
glad
add
I
to
can
it.
get it right once.
Yeah. On 230 jog recovery. That one actually fits well, so I don't mind that. So you can see here, like I kind of broke my rule as much as a straight tempo. And that's because what I'm thinking here is we're going to go to the 10K pace work here, but I'm actually going to give you some 2 to 230. And so the reason for the 2 to 230 like range on that is this is a pretty long section at 10K. And so if you've kind of screwed up the pacing a little bit, I'm just giving you that little bit extra as an out to kind of get it back in, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So then here we go. We're going to come back. What's this in here? Tempo. We're going to go, we did 12.5s last week. So I might actually, we're 4-ish weeks out. So this is where I'm going to go 20 to 25 minutes at tempo. Sorry, 22:30 to 25 minutes. Good long session. Can't fake that. Like you'll find out real quick if you're running tempo pace on that one for sure. Here, I might actually do a 5 by 3 minutes on interval pace, but I'm going to do it on 2 minutes. So I'm going to make that change. We're getting there. So we are 3 more weeks out here. So just as like a background point here. So if we're like 3-4 weeks out and I was actually coaching you one-on-one and getting your data from this would be a bit of an evaluation point in terms of how pacing's been, where you're feeling. Is it, we need to up the, upper end interval 5K pace work? Is it a strength perspective that we're looking at? So I'm going to go off what I know of you and kind of build here. But this would be a point where we would be looking to close any additional gaps with the information we have from the workouts. Does that make sense? So I'd actually go back and do 3 by 10 minutes here. So we're going to elongate that out. And again, that's going to be on 2 minutes jog recovery. So we did the 5 by 3. So I might go back to 10K pace here and do something like 4 by 5 minutes at 10K on, we're going to go 1 minute recovery. So again, elongating out that 10K a little bit, starting to continue to discover the pacing side on that. Back here, so we went 3 by 10, and I might go to something like 2 times 15 minutes tempo on 3 minutes. So why I'm doing that here for you is just starting to freshen up a little bit. Like obviously you're not tapering, but rather than going up to like 25 to 30 minutes, something like that, give you something that's a little bit more attainable that you can press really well with, and then still recover from to come back for a big interval session here. So I wouldn't do 5 by 4. That's a crazy hard workout, but you could do 4 times 4 on 2 minutes. That's the like Norwegian 4 by 4 that everybody talks about. This one here, I would actually look at going, I'm going to change up the structure a little bit. This is going to be 20 minutes at 10K.
And then
recoveries.
Go ahead. On the taper for a 10K tradition, like how long is that taper traditionally for like a 10K
1
versus 1 week? Okay.
Yeah, 1 week. You don't need much. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially on this volume. Yeah, you'd be fine. So we got the 4 by 4. This I might do. We did the 10K there. This I might do something like 5 times 1K. I'm going to break my other rule. This is the downside of social media. If I say something, it sounds like it's an absolute rather than a relative. But 5 times a K at 5K on 2 minutes for you recovery. So kind of another big max VO2 session, but we're kind of pushing the limits there. So yeah, those would be the workouts. And then we've got the 4 by 4 minutes tempo and boom, into race day.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What thoughts, questions? Happy to answer.
Yeah, so I guess the one thing too, so I know we didn't like touch on too much like the long run, but I know we talked about offline kind of like history of like volume and where it's been historically, and you talked about like maybe increasing volume to increase recovery. So looking at like some of those weeks, is it worth bumping up 10, 15, 20 minutes additional? Because I know like comparative to like what I've done in the past, which was like a took me like 2 hours, 5 minutes, I think, for my longest long run that I've done, with zero injury on that, and felt really good for that build. Like some of these are only at 50 minutes. Like, is it worth bumping those up and getting that additional volume in there, or is it like more worth it doing it during like the middle of the week, so to speak?
Yeah, the answer is it's both and it depends, but I won't just leave you on a cliffhanger and say that. I'll actually explain. So, generally, I would say you probably don't need over 90 minutes in the long run, 90, 100 minutes, give or take, in the long run for a 10K. That said, if your volume's lower, I can understand wanting to go higher, especially as like a working dad. Like there's more time on the weekend, I assume, that you can actually get out and do it.
Yep.
Again, if this was like best case, like you had all the time in the world and you could do it, I would say your better bang for your buck is actually getting up to 50 to 60 minutes on the easy days during the week.
Okay.
Again, respect that that's, might not always be the case. So again, I don't want to say you suck if you don't do this kind of thing. We got to work with you, the athlete, right?
Yeah.
But I still wouldn't go above 90 to 100, because for the 10K, you do want to hit those workouts pretty hard. Like for the
Okay.
marathon, you want to be really fatigued, right? And those workouts aren't going to be super sharp. Like you're going to feel a little bit flat. But for the 10K, you are going to get bit more bang for your buck, being able to hit those workouts hard.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
What other
And
thoughts or questions do you have?
so kind of, I guess, talking about like the base build, I know I threw in like strides and things like that. How about like throwing in strides on like easy days during the build where we do have like intensity? Like, is that something that's really important to make sure I'm like hitting, a variety of paces and getting a variety of stimulus? Or is that something that like we're hitting enough variety with I pace, T pace, 10K, 5K pace where like strides aren't necessary? I'm not doing enough volume to justify adding more to the bucket or the list of things that I need to do on a week to week basis from a pacing standpoint.
Yeah, it's a good question. So let's just make the assumption that strides take you roughly 5 minutes. Like do the stride, recover, do the stride, recover. It's probably about 5 minutes, depending on how many
Yeah.
you're doing, give or take, right?
Yep.
So if you were asking the question straight up, like, should I do strides or not do strides? My answer would be yes. But I would look at it more from a holistic perspective and go, what are the gaps in your training? Like, where can we add and get the most bang for your buck with those? Let's say 5 minutes is all you have extra on those days.
Mhm.
Because you're already hitting 2 workouts, I would add the aerobic stuff in because your volume's relatively low.
Okay.
So I'm not anti-stride. I love strides, like love them. They're great, right? But if I'm looking at you as an athlete, I'm looking at what your gaps are, not like, let's make sure you're doing everything. It's like, okay, what is the gap that we can actually close in the time that we have? Now,
Yep.
if this was like Thomas, who just ran 209, it's like, dude, do your friggin' strides, right? Like your job is to be a pro, right? But for you, the gap is going to be the volume. And I think the biggest bang for your buck on that is getting more of that zone 2, e-pace, whatever language you want to use for
Yep.
you to help close the gaps for your 10K goals.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. It makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah. What else are you thinking? Questions?
Um, I guess like as you're going on, I know you talked about like that reevaluation stage for somebody who's like doing a little bit more self-coaching. You know, I feel like a lot of people may go into self-coaching with a little bit of ego, like, hey, I know I can hit these numbers, and you kind of reference it
Yeah.
too, like you're going to be chasing a number your whole time through this plan. When do you like sit yourself down, I guess, and be like, hey, I know we have this goal, or this was the goal, let's readjust. Like, is it during like close to taper week? I know you said kind of a reevaluate there, but like, let's say throughout, like I'm seeing like days where I'm like really exceeding pace, or like days where I'm really below paces that I'm like want to hit or desire to hit for that workout. When do you like try to address it with someone who's like self-coaching?
Yeah, it's a good question. So generally, I would say it's more rare that I see someone exceeding the paces when we change the recoveries like we did in that, because it's
Mhm.
really hard to push on those workouts, especially on some of those longer tempos and longer 10K pace work. Because if you do, the subjective part of you is going to be like, sweet, I hit the number. But the
Yep.
objective side of you is going to be like, there's no friggin' way I can hold that for 10K or hold it for 45 to 60 minutes for tempo.
Mhm.
And so I would look at it, and let's say we go back to the like 22 and a half to 25 minutes at tempo, because that's kind of like a mid-ish way from when workout started to racing, right?
Yep.
Maybe 2/3 of the way. I would look at that and go, was that really hard and I really struggled to do it? And then I would go, okay, there's two questions that I need to answer then. Is it a fitness problem or a pacing problem? And so more times than not, it's probably a pacing problem. And that's what I would go to seek and fix first before deciding there's a massive fitness problem. So if you go out and you're like, oh, I started the first mile, 5 to 7 seconds a mile slow, felt really easy, eased into it, got to it, and at 21 minutes and 46 seconds, I fell apart. Okay, that's probably a fitness problem. But if you're like, nope, tempo pace is tempo pace, and I'm on it from step one, and I'm checking my watch, and I'm doing it, that's probably a pacing problem. And so that's how I would look at making that adjustment. If for whatever reason we've underestimated on paces, or you're a hyper responder, let's say, that's when I might go, okay, we're 6 weeks in, we've got of workouts, we're 3 weeks of workouts where things have gone really, really well and I've exceeded it. Okay, that's a time that we might move up the interval pace. I would keep tempo pace the same, but I would move up interval pace first.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because actually I commented on one of your videos talking about it, like when do you adjust those paces? Like when,
Yeah.
because and I think your response was something along the lines of like, and again, don't want to say it's a rule or that you said
Yeah.
it's a rule, but it's like ideally do a time trial. And that's kind of like why I stuck a time trial in there was just
Fair enough.
to,
Yeah.
for my sake, like, hey, is my pace going to change or like should my pace goals change? Should I, either to be conservative or to again bump it up? And so yeah, I really appreciate that like additional context there of like how to approach that side of approaching a race and goal pace and everything.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that's probably a good spot. Hopefully, that's lots of great stuff. I'll send you this form afterwards so you've got everything that we've broken down on. But I just wanted to say thank you and I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've been commenting for a while, so I appreciate all your questions and comments and your desire to learn. And hopefully, this is really helpful for you.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the opportunity and really hope that people get some good use out of this, some good knowledge out of it. I know I will and definitely looking forward to approaching the build a little bit more now that I have something that's a little bit more tailored for me.
Awesome. Cool. Well, keep me posted on how it goes. If you're interested in being coached by me, this is the exact same type of discipline and intensity that I take when working through plans with my athletes and setting them up for success. So if you're interested in having this on a one-on-one level, feel free, click the link below, check out my Team Run profile. You can sign up. We can get started today and get you moving towards big PRs, injury-free training, and all the goals you're looking for.